mean, files and content is a lifeblood of businesses today. I mean, we have paper here. 2 years from now, there's not going to be paper here. Paper is going away. Everything is going digital. And digital is the future, and that's a lifeblood of business. So when businesses are looking at cloud services, they are becoming way more intelligent than they used to be. They understand that, you know, you have to look at things like, you know, is your data in a secure data center, right? What happens if there's an earthquake? Is the data in more than one location? What if I'm storing patient information, you know? Will that be looked at and so forth? So what we're really seeing and what we're doing as a company is that we're sort of said, okay, this free stuff, we can't really compete in that business. You know, we're in the business segment where businesses understand that this is strategic for them, that cloud storage and services built on top of it is there and it's strategic. So we're there, we're charging money for it. We kind of made a conscious decision that we don't have a free service. Yeah, we will let people try our service, we'll let them experience on their own what we do, but ultimately they have to pay for it. And ultimately what we sell here is that we don't sell storage. What we sell is we sell seats. And with these seats come functionality. So as we heard here, you know, storage is sort of the underlying foundation, and the storage is strategic because it has to be safe, secure, and all those things. But it's a lot about the services you build on top of it. So one of the things that we have been focusing a lot on is sort of the mobile aspect of it, right? So today's worker, like I bet like most people here have 3 or more devices, right? In average, our users have 3.5 devices. They have a laptop, they have a smartphone, and they have a tablet, and they have an iPad mini. That's a half device, right? And they're going to get Google Glasses soon. They're going to get an iWatch and all that. They're going to get, you know, internet on the TV, and it's in the car and so forth, right? So these users are going to expect to be able to continue doing things wherever they are. And so that may be, you know, changing files, forwarding, you know, faxing, whatever. And that's a lot of what we're building into our platform on top of the storage layers, all those, you know, value-adding, you know, features.
But I think the answer to the question about security, that's actually one of the core tenets of Bitcasa, so that we as a company, we don't have access to any of that data. Because when I put my tax returns inside of a cloud storage solution, I want to ensure that no one's, not by policy, they are unable to see that information. If I have my daughter's picture, I don't want to see an ad next to that. Or I don't want to, you know, the last thing I want is for my privacy to be violated by a corporation or some other individual that has malicious intent. That's the core tenet of Bitcasa. You put it inside of Bitcasa, it's encrypted client-side. We don't have access to it for any reason whatsoever.
Okay, great, Tony. I think that's an interesting point, but can you tell us a little bit about how you make sure that there's no duplication here when you are not actually able to see the data if it's encrypted?
Sure. So one of the things that you know, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I was born and raised there. I've been doing software development since I was 8 years old. I worked at MasterCard where I designed the fraud prediction systems that are in production today. So if you take a credit card, you swipe it, there's a system that will determine in real time if that credit card transaction is fraudulent or not based on your historical transaction pattern. So you remember that $40 million ATM heist that happened a few weeks ago? That was actually a system, that was the second generation of a system that I designed in production at MasterCard. I'm kind of proud of that. So what happened is I bought a MacBook Air, I dragged and dropped all my software utilities and music, and I immediately ran out of space. Well, how do you solve that problem? Well, you create streaming storage, just like a Netflix or a Spotify. And what I did is I literally wrote the patent for this amazing invention back in St. Louis, which is the core technology. So we do some very interesting things with content before we actually send it to the cloud. We don't save files at all. We literally have billions of blocks of encrypted data that are assembled in real time to recreate your files. So we don't have access to anything. That's how we know if something exists, because we just ask the server, have you ever seen this block before? But we don't know if that block is a picture or a music file or a video or my tax return. We don't care. We just know that it exists.
But you can't add any valued services on top of it. Just kidding.
Well, we do today, actually.
I think that, you know, the topic here is what's next in
Yeah.
cloud storage, and I think you know, we talked a lot about files and pictures and movies, and that's kind of what's here today. And I think you know, I made the point earlier. You look at things like the Nest, you know, thermostat, and your Fitbit wristwatch, and all these things that are going to be generating even more and more data. And so I think that, we talk about the future, it's not just about bringing your photos, the stuff that you used to keep on your local hard drive, putting it in the cloud. You look at, developing markets where people never had a laptop, and the first device they're going to have is a phone. And so you've got a whole new set of data that's going to go into the cloud. And so I think that's really where, there certainly is the infrastructure piece and bringing that over. But the future is going to be less about your files and your MP3s and more about keeping everything directly in the cloud to start.
And is Google coming up with a way for me to upload my data from all of my many connected devices? And are you guys also thinking up ways to display for me what's happening, or is that something that I can't even do?
No, you can't.
On Bitcasa?
Of course.
Okay, all right. Nick?
Yeah, but the uploads there today, that's what, we talked before about syncing, that's kind of where we're coming from. That's the legacy of having local, whether it's servers in your data center or a local hard drive in your machine, you have to get that online, get it down to your devices. But as more and more content is just generated in the cloud to start, so if you're doing Netflix, you don't have those movies locally, it's already in the cloud. And so it's less about the kind of pure storage, and it's more about what you're doing with that information.
The other thing I would add here in terms of the future and all that, right? We're sitting here talking about cloud, and we're all excited about it. But whether we like it or not, offline is still a very relevant use case. A lot of the time, when I go to an event or at the ballpark or in the air or whatever, right, there is no connectivity. And so I think that this whole concept of like, okay, what happens when the cloud is not there is very relevant. And I think that is a lot of the, drive towards, synchronization, right? You want to have it down locally. You also want to have it down locally because it's my device and it's, faster when I operate locally than through the cloud. We see a lot of businesses that are sort of looking at how do I balance local storage with the cloud? And there's a lot of gray there where it's like, some companies, think of like, the government, right? You're thinking about drones flying around, filming people and all that, right? Those video files are pretty large, and they would like something like a Dropbox, but they can't use Dropbox because it's not secure. They still want to email them around and so forth. So they want to keep these things local, but still have sort of, Dropbox-like functionality. So I think there is a lot of gray between sort of the cloud up here and then, local storage down here. And there's a lot of people in the storage space and so forth that are sort of thinking about that, right? You see concepts like object storage, right, which is sort of this idea of large virtual space of storage and so forth, right, on-prem and so forth, and that combined with the cloud. There's a question of metadata. Where's the metadata in the cloud? There's a lot of things like that I think will be topics for the future, and a lot of people are sort of working on. And meanwhile, when you look at sync, right, anybody that uses things like, iCloud from Apple, right, knows that it's difficult because the damn thing doesn't work. I still have my songs, on some devices and not other devices and so forth. It really annoys me.
I actually disagree. I think local storage is actually dead. I think that we as consumers are becoming more and more connected every day. I just drove from Mountain View and I went through 3G, 4G, and LTE. And the drone that you were just talking about is streaming that video right back to some data center somewhere in the air on some other network that we don't even know
The
about.
government will never feel comfortable with that unless they own that data center. I'll tell you that.
Sure, absolutely.
As a citizen, I don't want my video to be shared by
Absolutely.
somebody that's certain on that. So
But I think my point is that for you to carry it around in your pocket or to have it locally in your device, it's limited.
that's right.
So just why even do that? Use the exact same model that a Netflix does, which is instead of having a whole library on your desktop, you stream it in real time. That's the future.
But what do you do when you're in a boardroom and there's no connectivity?
I've
What if
never
you're
been a
in
boardroom
rural
that's never
Oregon?
had
I have.
connectivity.
Because I have been.
Has
I have
anybody
that
been in a
problem.
boardroom with no connectivity here? I think that happens unfortunately.
This year?
Especially in Europe. All over.
you have a tablet?
Go to Asia.
Well, do you think that'll happen next year?
Yes, and it's going to happen the next 5 years in a lot of places around the world. Maybe not in the
Unfortunately,
valley.
unfortunately, this last mile argument has been had for over a decade now.
Yeah.
Are we going to ever get to the last mile? Is the rural Idaho, rural Oregon going to get broadband? Things that I've learned in my time in the cloud is that we're building for things for people who don't have the last mile problem. And that's
Exactly.
that's the reality of what we're
Exactly.
doing. Now, I do think offline is still key because you could be in a total ferret cage of the airport in Oakland, okay?
Why United?
And need offline stuff. But again, that's not the future. What is the future?
Yes.
Where is, you know, I agree with some of what Tony is saying here in that it's out there and it's available. I think I just differ on the mechanics of what's out there. I mean, imagine a world in which you go, you know, whether you use Comcast or whatever, and you forgot to record the Giants game on DVR. And you go into the DVR and you go, well, somebody in this network of peers has the Giants game recorded. So just on demand that to me. You know, why are we not there yet? Why can't we have an unlimited size DVR? I think the stuff that Google is doing with fiber is phenomenal. I think that it's game breaking. You look at the internet speeds on average in Kansas City after fiber was installed, up 250%. It's forcing ISPs to compete, and with more and more broadband access in these municipalities, you potentially could create a more distributed cloud system, whether it's some in data centers, some in smart DVRs and smart TVs and Space Monkey devices. I think at some point, you know, we've got to, you know, it'll be interesting to see if we continue to institutionalize everything, and Google will definitely try to do that, and for their, you know, added services. But are there more open APIs into the cloud? Are there more, you know, combinations of saying, hey, I use Google Plus, but I still store my photos in Space Monkey, or my physical storage is in Space Monkey, but I use Google Plus for viewing and browsing, or Flickr. You know, I don't actually care where it's stored, but I like these services. And could there be more open APIs? I think that's the future. I think that we're afraid to talk about that. I mean, but reality is, like, that's when we'll break through. That's when really cool shit will happen. I mean, when companies are like, look, here's the API to my storage layer, go to town. And I think there's some really cool stuff. And Google's doing that, Dropbox is doing that. You know, everything that we build is based on API layer, whether it's you know, our client or web app or mobile app. We dog food that API so that someday when somebody says, hey, I'm going to build an unlimited DVR with Space Monkey devices, they have the ability to do that. So I think where data is stored isn't that interesting. It's how open do we become as kind of an ecosystem.
And there's a regulatory issue too, and kind of where we are today and the future, right? So part of it's bandwidth and availability, and you will still be offline in certain places, and that will change over time, but maybe longer than we expect. But there's also a regulatory thing that needs to catch up, right? So talk about the Giants game, right? There's a whole bunch of craziness around media and what
Sure.
we can do with it, and that's kind of in the dark ages. You look at government, or you look at things like healthcare and financial, where the regulations are 20 years old and were never written for kind of this cloud model, and so that's also another big gap to getting kind of to the future of online is getting through that regulatory mess and getting things kind of updated there.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you know, the future is the future, right? And you know, because something is a good idea or it feels right or whatever, doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. And you know, I want internet connectivity everywhere too. You know, I think, you know, when I travel, you know, I'm from Denmark, full disclosure, so I'm actually a Viking at some level, and you know, I have people over there and so forth, and I go to places like that. I go to Asia a lot, and you know, I mean, mileage does vary, right, in terms of coverage. I think, you know, another example of an interesting thing that I think is related to this is sort of the whole concept of, you know, we talk about online storage, right? There's also the application experience, where, you know, things like, you know, Google Docs has been out there for many, many years. And so the whole idea of like editing and working in your browser, right, it's a great idea. I mean, as a developer, you can do cross-platform development and all that, right? But when I talk to people out there, you know, I meet very few people that love to edit their PowerPoints in Google Docs. They still like, you know, good old PowerPoint on the desktop because it's a better experience. And we're pushing HTML5 very hard and so forth, right? I mean, same thing on mobile. Writing a native mobile iOS app versus HTML5. Is that a good idea? I mean, is it a good idea to do HTML5? Yes, it is a good idea from an engineering perspective, but from end users that want to have responsive applications, that want to work wherever they are, it's not a good idea. It's not there yet, right? And you know, you guys have been pushing that for many years, and now you have, you know, Google Drive, and I think part of why you have Google Drive is a realization that people like to work with their stuff on the desktop. You probably wouldn't have done Google Drive if it wasn't for the fact that people still like to have stuff on their computer so they can sit in an airplane and view their files.